Over in Westminster, the king was about to embark on a brand new development that would astound and amaze. It was called Whitehall.
This was a king who threw out the rule book and in so doing transformed London. He was, of course, Henry VIII.
This domineering king had a single-minded ambition to create the largest palace in the known world. But he wouldn't stop there. His insatiable desire for money was about to change the face of London forever.
In 1529, Henry VIII had already been on the throne for 20 years. But his need to father a legitimate male heir, not to mention his wandering eye, meant that he would soon utterly transform the capital.
Henry's impact on London began in an area that is now called Whitehall in Westminster. Today it houses government offices. In the Tudor period, there was an enormous mansion here that belonged to the king's advisor, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey.
In Tudor London, Cardinal Wolsey was the second most influential man after the king. He was Lord Chancellor. He was head of the Catholic Church in England, and he built himself fantastic palaces, palaces practically fit for a king. That was his first mistake. Added to that, in 1529, Henry wanted to marry his mistress, Ann Boleyn, and Wolsey failed to get an annulment of Henry's marriage to Cathryn of Aragon. That was his second.
In retaliation, Henry had Wolsey charged with treason, and he seized the cardinal's desirable London residence for himself. He extended it massively, creating his Whitehall Palace. It was incredible, the largest palace in Europe and a new centre of power in the capital.
Tragically, Henry VIII's palace was gutted by fire in 1698, but not all of it was lost. I'm here at the offices of the Ministry of Defence at Whitehall, and I'm very lucky to get access. It's not every day that you can walk in here, but I've been given permission to see something I've never seen before.
This area is off limits to the public, and filming is carefully controlled for security reasons. But I'm going down below the MOD's rather characterless modern corridors to see what remains of Henry VIII's lost palace.
Oh, wow. This is incredible. This is a vaulted chamber. It was Henry VIII's wine cellar from his Whitehall Palace. So this is a palace that dominated this area of London, and this is all that survives of it. This is a place that Henry lived, he was married, he died. And we know that he used to come down to his wine cellars and sit down and gamble at cards with his men. Probably had a glass of wine as well too. And here I am in the space that he would have done that.
This small wine cellar is all that survives of a massive complex of buildings that radically increased the size of Westminster.
By the time it burnt down, Whitehall Palace contained more than 1,500 rooms and stretched over an area from Trafalgar Square down to Downing Street and out to the Thames. In fact, let me show you. This is a modern map of London, and we're here, and it stretched over this whole area here. So let me show you here. So we've got Trafalgar Square, all the way down to Downing Street, out to the Thames, although the Thames was a bit nearer then, and back again. So it covered some 23 acres of prime London real estate.
Henry had created an enormous private playground, but this was just the start. His insatiable greed would go on to utterly change the shape and character of London.
This is Hyde Park. It's one of the capital's most famous open green spaces, and it plays a key role in our story of Tudor London.
This sprawling 650-acre patch of prime London real estate changed hands nearly 500 years ago when Henry VIII seized it from the Catholic Church and turned it into a private hunting park. But that land grab was part of an event that started in the 1530s and radically changed the landscape of our nation and of our capital.
It began when Henry VIII cut England off from the Catholic Church. He then set his sights on taking over all their land.
In the City of London, the church owned more property than anyone else. As much as 60% of the land was held by Catholic monasteries.
Here at the London Metropolitan Archives, there's an etching that shows just how the capital's skyline was dominated by buildings owned by the church.
This is the Flemish artist Anthony van der Vingaard's panorama of London. It was originally created in 1550, and you really do get a sense of the whole of Tudor London stretching out as seen from the south bank of the Thames. Here's London Bridge, we've got St Paul's here, and dotted around really all over the city are monasteries, some of them in prime locations right by the riverfront.
From 1535 onwards, the church's massive London property portfolio was targeted by Henry VIII. In most cases, properties were simply handed over, but for the few who refused to conform to the king's will, there was bloodshed. Like here at Charterhouse in Smithfield.
The site covers about 13 acres, and in the early 1530s it had an annual income of around £640. Today that would be about £250,000. It also had a leader, Prior John Houghton, who strongly disapproved of Henry's sweeping religious changes. And that would be a bad combination.
On the 4th of May 1535, the king's trusted servants were sent to Charterhouse to insist that the prior and his monks acknowledge Henry as the head of the church. Historian Jenny Draper is an expert on what happened next.
Wow. Jenny, this is such a beautiful space, it's hard to imagine anyone not being happy with it. But what was Henry VIII's problem with Charterhouse?
Well, the Charterhouse monks were really popular with the people, so when they didn't agree to his supremacy of the church, it was seen as a real threat to him.
And how did he react to that threat?
The prior, John Houghton, was hanged, drawn and quartered.
Which is not a nice way to go.
It's one of the worst ways you can go. He's taken to Tyburn. He is hanged until he's nearly dead. They cut him down before he asphyxiates. They cut him open here, and they take all his insides out. And then they cut him into quarters.
Right.
His arm was nailed to the door of the Charterhouse.
Now, if I was a monk at Charterhouse and I saw my boss's arm nailed up there, I'm sorry, I'm falling straight into line and I'm taking the oath, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's what I'd do. But it's not what they do. I mean, to them, it's not just a matter of life and death. It's a matter of their souls, their eternal souls. They cannot call Henry the head of the church. It goes completely against their convictions. So most of the monks in the Charterhouse refused to take the oath, even after that. So they're also arrested. They're put in the Tower. And they are starved to death.
Oh. So at that point is the end of Charterhouse as a monastery under Henry VIII?
Yeah, Henry VIII takes hold of the land and the buildings. He uses it as a storage space, essentially. He doesn't ever live here, he just leaves his stuff here.
Wow. So at the end of all this process, Henry's got rid of all the monks who wouldn't do what he said, and he's got Charterhouse. It's kind of a win-win.
For him, yeah.
For him.
Henry's brutal seizure of Charterhouse was the beginning of a land grab that would turn him into the capital's richest property tycoon. He bagged himself hundreds of acres of London, which he then rented out or sold on to the gentry and nobility for a massive profit.
This was a cataclysmic, traumatic time that changed the whole belief system and the landscape of the country. And London, with its unusually high concentration of religious houses, was utterly transformed.